You all seem to know at least one of the things that I'm going to say about this, so let me just say it now and get it out of the way. This movie is 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's the same movie. There is no difference. None. You can either watch 2001 or watch this. No difference. No plot. No story. No characters. No narrative structure. Just a bunch of dead, lifeless special effects. However, there is a reason 2001 was successful and this movie wasn't. At the time of its release, 2001: A Space Odyssey was new. By that I mean that it wasn't based on anything that had come before it. It wasn't part of any previous franchise or done in the style or strategy of any previous science fiction outings. And as it was new, it naturally gained a new audience. And clearly there were a great many things about this new film that appealed to that new audience. At the time of the motion picture's release, Star Trek was not new. It was a beloved, groundbreaking science fiction series that had earned millions of fans who, when they bought their ticket for the new Star Trek movie, were expecting to see, well, a Star Trek movie. That's what makes this different than 2001. That, in fact, is what makes this movie's crimes all the greater, in my view, than 2001's crimes. I don't know what people were expecting to see when they went into 2001, and honestly, neither did they. But I do know that no one was going into the first Star Trek film expecting to see 2001. They came for a Star Trek movie. What they got was an unfinished mess. It would be impossible for me to actually review this movie step by step because there was no movie here. Literally, the screenplay was not finished even as they were shooting, and eventually the actors were forced to just make it up every day. I'm not kidding. It is the single biggest production disaster I have ever researched. Writers were hired and fired like a revolving door even during shooting. Special effects were ordered before the script was finished, forcing them to use the effects, even if the revised script didn't call for the effect, and a kind of behind-the-scenes drama that would cause any film to fail. This film was also made in the wake of other sci-fi successes like Star Wars and Close Encounters, but this had the unfortunate effect of making people in the production think about effects before they even thought about a script. When you are given a bloated effects budget before you even pen your first draft, your movie is probably in trouble. Still, the blame must be put somewhere, and at the risk of becoming even more controversial than I already am, my opinion is that the fault lies with Gene Roddenberry. I don't think Gene is a very good writer. I really don't. The man had some brilliant concepts in his career, but those concepts were always better than his ability to hammer them into a good script. Almost none of the truly great Star Trek episodes were even written by him, and let's face it, The Next Generation didn't become the phenomenal show that it was until after his passing. The man suffers from the problem of not being able to do more than one thing at a time with a story. He has the idea of a machine being mistaken for God, for example, or the question of whether or not God is a machine. Great. So where does the Enterprise crew fit into this? How are they going to participate in the story? These are the questions that Gene just couldn't answer very well. He had one idea and expected that idea to carry an entire film. I want to read you a quote from Leonard Nimoy when he was talking to Gene about where Spock fit into the whole thing. Gene had told him that he envisioned Spock going back to Vulcan in order to purge any remaining humanity and ultimately having a Vulcan nervous breakdown, and Leonard's response in retrospect was this: "I couldn't believe it. I couldn't figure out why I'd want to go to a movie and see that, let alone play it. Who cares? What's it got to do with the story? There was nothing writable there, nothing playable. There was no indication of where Spock would fit into the bigger picture. I took it as Gene really being lost on that issue. He was just farting around, trying to shoehorn the character into the basic framework of his existing screenplay." God bless you, Leonard Nimoy. Who cares? What's it got to do with the story is absolutely the correct response to that bullshit. The bottom line is that Gene's original idea for this film sucked. and everybody knew it. You didn't have one person involved in the writing or production that was in Gene's corner on this one. It was just a terrible idea. Another one of those oops, God is a machine stories that he had done in the original series and would go on to do in the next generation. Except this one was just dumb and dull, giving the Enterprise crew nothing to do but go there, have the God thing tell them to worship it, have the crew tell it no, and then the credits roll. This is precisely why other writers were hired, to balance Gene out and make his story elements workable on the screen. But Gene couldn't accept that. He couldn't accept that someone else was altering his story. So he began to openly sabotage the other writers' efforts, taking their drafts, reworking them himself, and then sending them to Paramount under their name. Needless to say, it was impossible for the writers to work under those conditions, and you soon had every writer hired for this project quitting at least once in this production. Rewrites were taking place until the project wrapped, which means that the actors literally did not know what was going on in the film from one moment to the next. With that in mind, it's no wonder that this was the unfinished mess that it was, but these circumstances do not change the fact that this was a bad movie. It is, in my opinion, the worst of all the Star Trek movies, if only on the basis that it wasn't actually finished, but was released anyway. I mean, for fuck's sake. Finally, I want to speak to one of the great controversies about all this, among Star Trek fans and among moviegoers in general. If you like this movie, if you think this movie is great and enjoy it more than any other of the Star Trek films, wonderful. I mean that. At least someone had a better time than me watching this nightmare. But to the ever-shrinking minority of viewers who think that this movie is some misunderstood work of genius, and that anyone who doesn't think so just isn't getting something, or is at worst being anti-intellectual, I'm sorry, you have to be joking. This isn't like 2001, where statements on whether or not it was about anything were left deliberately vague. Anytime Kubrick was told that his screenplay came off like an unfinished work, he would always say something to the effect of, well, it was supposed to be that way. In one interview, Kubrick had said that his main aim was to avoid intellectual verbalization and reach the viewer's subconscious or some meaningless bullshit like that. To quote him directly from a Playboy magazine interview, "You're free to speculate as you wish about the philosophical and allegorical meaning of the film, and such speculation is one indication that it has succeeded in gripping the audience at a deep level. But I don't want to spell out a verbal roadmap for 2001 that every viewer will feel obligated to pursue, or else fear he's missed the point." My response to nonsense like this is that a roadmap for a film is what a screenplay is, and you can jump up and down and shout "pay no attention to that man behind the curtain" all you want, you're not fooling me. But if this is a satisfactory explanation for you and you take Kubrick at his word, then the question of whether or not 2001 was about anything at all is an area of discussion that is at least somewhat arguable. There's nothing arguable here. No one involved in the cast, direction, writing staff, set design, or anyone on any level of production even denies that they didn't have a finished screenplay. There's no work of genius here, no great mind was behind this, no outstanding cerebral point is being made. What you are looking at is an unfinished production disaster. I've said this of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I mean it 10 times more here. If you think this movie is brilliant, that's all well and good. But when you're arguing that this movie is brilliant, you do have to contend with facts. And the fact of the matter is, there is no screenplay. And when there is no screenplay, there is no brilliance.